So for an introduction, I was going to describe a little bit what gamification is, but Zach already did it, so thank you, Zach. So basically, gamification is the use of game elements in non-game contexts, and it has used for many different purposes. We have seen a lot of good examples here in this conference, which include raising health and fitness awareness and helping improve one's productivity and so on. And it has also been widely used in gamification for now. So it is used on popular services such as Khan Academy and Code Academy, and there are also many good research works that show how it can be used to engage students and to reach them. So we also have been working with gamification in education for 4 years now. We have a gamified course named Multimedia Content Production, and we have presented some works where we have observed that students were actually more engaged with our gamified version of the course. However, there is a question that no one seems to have answered yet, which is how do different students experience gamified education? So are they equally engaged by it, or are there differences? So no one has answered it yet to our knowledge, so this was the main motivation behind the study that I'm presenting here today. So basically, we observed how different students, they progress over the course in a daily basis, and then we used cluster analysis to try to identify different types of students, different strategies and different traits, and then we tried to relate these types of students with their gaming preferences and habits, which we collected via a questionnaire. So we ended up with 4 different categories of students with different traits, and here I will thoroughly describe them and correlate them with their gaming profiles. So our course, the Multimedia Content Production course, is actually a gamified course for grad students where students learn several concepts and techniques related to multimedia and about their implementation. And it follows a blended learning program where they attend live theoretical lectures and lab classes, but they also engage in discussions and work on assignments on a virtual learning environment powered by Moodle, where mainly they interact via posts on forums. So instead of getting a traditional grade, students earn experience points by completing course activities, which are manifold. Okay, they had like a final multimedia presentation, a final exam, regular lab assignments. They had a participation on the skill tree. They had 30 achievements to complete, which included the participation on 10 challenges, on a quest, and the Avatar World. Okay, I know this is a lot, and I will explain what these are. So the achievements were basically tasks that students had to complete to receive experience points and badges. And they could be like multi-level, so they could, for example, had to do 3 iterations to get 3 badges and more experience points. And examples of these were to attending classes, suggesting relevant reference materials, completing challenges, and so on. Challenges were basically time-limited tasks where students had to come up with creative content in response to specific requests from faculty staff. And this also earned them experience points and badges. We also had the Multimedia Content Production quest, which was added to promote collaboration between students. Basically, it's an online reader where students start from a website which provides them with a multimedia artifact, like an image, an audio clip, a video, and so on. They had to edit and manipulate that artifact in order to find the URL for the next clue, and the further they went in the riddle, the more XP they would get. We also had Avatar World, which is a 2.5D virtual environment which students could explore with their avatar, which they could customize with items. And they were encouraged to create custom content like equipment items and buildings using techniques and tools that we taught them how to use in the classes. So the skill tree. The skill tree was a precedence tree where each node corresponded to a thematic task, and the students could unlock new nodes by completing the preceding ones. So they could pick their own path and achieve the same amount of grade through different courses. So the participation on every one of these components was actually made via posts on Moodle. Okay, so the faculty staff made an initial post, and then they had to work on it. The leaderboard. The leaderboard was actually the entrance point to our experience. It was a web page linked from our forums, which displayed the students where they could compare themselves with others, assess their progress, check their achievements, and so on. So, in order to identify the nature of our students and try to tell them apart and to find some way to differentiate them, we have to find a single progress measurement that could be plotted over time. We thought about both the amount of experience points accumulated per day and their ranking, but we ended up ruling out ranking because two students with the same performance could never be at the same ranking at a given time. So we went with the amount of experience points accumulated per day. Then we used cluster analysis to try to group the students according to similarities of XP acquisition. And the algorithm that we used was the expectation maximization because we didn't know beforehand the number of clusters that we were dealing with, and because our population was small. So this algorithm received as attributes the amount of experience points per day for each student, and as an output we received the clusters of students. We then related at each cluster with their performance metrics that we collected over the course, and with their gaming traits and preferences, which we collected via questionnaire at the beginning of the course. Our population was composed by 54 students, of which 12 were female students. And to compare the measurements between the clusters, we used non-parametric tests because we couldn't verify the normality of our samples, and we used a Kruskal-Wallis test with post-hoc mean witness and Bonferroni correction. For the questionnaires, we compared them using the responses modes. So let's look to the clusters. We got 4 different clusters. Looking to their average accumulation XP curve, we have the first cluster, cluster A, which had 7 students. They had the highest curve with the steepest slopes, which show that these students really worked hard on every opportunity they got to accumulate experience points. We also got cluster B with 23 students. It was the largest cluster, and these students also had above average performance, and they got really close to cluster A by the end of the course. Cluster C and cluster D, they had 13 and 11 students respectively, and they lagged a little bit behind as compared to the other 2 clusters. This had direct repercussions over their average ranking over time, with cluster A and cluster B dominating the top half of the leaderboard and getting really close to each other by the end, and with cluster C and cluster D lying on the bottom half of the leaderboard with a steady distance between them. So cluster A was characterizing by having the highest lab grade and the highest final grade, even though significant differences weren't observed among all clusters. And they also had the most posts, so they were really participative. And they also excelled on all game components. They had like 100% on everything except for Avatar World, which they only managed to get 97%. So because of all this commitment, we named them the Achievers. Cluster B, they had the highest presentation grade and the highest exam grade, but they were second to cluster A in almost everything, but they were like really, really close. And except for Avatar World and the skill tree, which they lagged a little bit behind. So because of this high level of commitment, and because they were also the largest cluster, we named them the regular students. Cluster C, so these students had the second highest presentation grade, but they had the fewest first posts. So they weren't exactly very proactive or participative for that matter. And they were third on most aspects, and they had poor performance regarding the Avatar World and the skill tree. So this seemingly lack of performance made us name them the half-hearted students. Cluster D, these students had the lowest grades. They were less on almost every aspect of the game. They ignored most of the game components like Avatar World, the quest, and the skill tree, and they had poor performance on the challenges. So basically, they did enough to pass the course, and because of this, we named them the Underachievers. So our data suggests that these clusters represent different tiers of students. And this is particularly true for the Halfhearted and the Underachievers. This is the ranking by the end of the course, and we can see that the Halfhearted and the Underachievers occupy relatively distinct bands of the leaderboard. However, the Achievers and the regular students are harder to tell apart. We can actually see that the top 2 positions were actually regular students. So we believe that these 2 kinds of students were able to achieve comparable or similar levels of performance, however, through the different passes. On the one hand, we have the Achievers, which seemingly they work more for the game components and for the regular lab assignments. And on the other hand, we have the regular students, which worked more for the final presentation, for the final exam. Now, let's now take a look to their responses to the gaming questionnaire, which we made by the beginning of the course. We asked them several questions, but I'm only going to address a few of them, given that I don't have that much time. So we asked them if they prefer to play single-player or multiplayer game. Most clusters prefer to play multiplayer game, with the exception of Underachievers, which prefer single-player games. Then we asked them if they consider themselves more of an hardcore or casual gamer, and most clusters considered to be something in between, which was actually a valid response. So, the virtue is in the middle. And the exception were actually the regular students, which claimed to be more of casual gamers. As for frequency of play, most clusters consider that they played on a daily basis, and again, regular students, they play more on a weekly basis. We then asked them to self-report their classification according to the BrainX model, which is a model based upon neurobiological responses inherent to playing games. And this model classifies players both with the main class and the secondary class from a pool of 7 types. I'm only going to explain 5 of them because those were the most observed in our population. So we had the seeker, which are players that enjoy exploring the environment and finding wonderful things. We have the masterminds, which likes to use strategy and to take the most efficient decision. We have the conqueror. The conqueror likes to defeat difficult foes and to defeat other opponents. The socializer, who likes to help other players and to hang out with people who they trust. And we have the achiever, who likes long-term goals. They like to collect special items and to amass currency. So we asked our students to self-report their main class, and 30% of them were conquerors, 21% of them were mastermind, and 50% were achievers. Delving into the clusters, we can see that the achievers were predominantly classified as socializers and mastermind. We do believe that our experience might indeed appeal more to this type of students. The socializers, because our experience is inherently multiplayer, they have to cooperate, for example, in the lab assignments and the multimedia content production quest, and the mastermind, because students have to plan ahead and to use strategy to unlock that specific node on the skill tree or to complete that achievement. The regular students, on the other hand, they were classified also as masterminds, but as achievers too. And we believe that our experience might have some appeal to the achievers because they have a lot of digital artifacts to collect and to unlock, such as the badges. The half-hearted students and the underachievers, they were much closer to each other regarding this matter. They were predominantly classified as conquerors, and the underachievers were also classified as seekers. And we do, in fact, believe that our experience doesn't appeal that much to this type of players as it did to the others. Conquerors like to defeat other players and difficult foes, and our experience was more about the long-term goal of finishing the course. And seekers like to explore the world and find wonderful things, and they couldn't do that in our experience, with the exception of the avatar world. So we believe that this had a potential to hinder their engagement with the course. So we believe that this kind of experiment is important to come up with better ways of learning. This study showed that there is a lot of descriptive power on the students' data that participate on a gamified learning experience, not only on their participation and performance metrics, but also in their gaming preferences as well. So we are actually currently doing a new study where we're trying to find out which is the most descriptive features that we can measure early on, so that we can turn this descriptive power into predictive power by training a classifier and being able to create an adaptive gamified learning environment which can adapt to students in real time and actually help those in need, such as our half-hearted students and underachievers. So, to conclude, I've presented you a new study where I try to answer the question, how do different types of students experience gamified education? In the particular case of our course, we identified 4 types of students: the achievers, the regular students, the half-hearted students, and the underachievers, how with different traits regarding their performance, participation, and gaming preferences as well. So we do believe that this kind of this experiment allowed us to have a deeper understanding on how different students address gamified learning and how potentially their gaming preferences might affect their performance and their experience as well. And we discussed how this kind of experiment is important to shape the new concept of adaptive gamified learning. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, please.